Nothing in your life is random, and they've lied to you about that since the moment you could think. Every so-called coincidence, every odd alignment of events, every repeating number you've dismissed as strange but meaningless, none of it happened by chance. You've been trained to believe that reality is mechanical, cold, indifferent, that patterns are nothing more than your brain playing tricks on you. But what if those moments you wrote off as coincidences were actually the universe speaking directly to you? What if, behind the thin veil of normal life, there exists an intelligent network guiding you, nudging you, trying to wake you up? You've seen the numbers: 11, 222, 333. You've felt the strange timing of events that seemed too perfect to be chance. And yet, you told yourself it was nothing. That's not your fault. They made sure you'd think that way. Because when you begin to see the patterns for what they really are, everything changes. From the moment you were old enough to ask questions, the world started feeding you answers. Answers you never asked for. Answers designed to shape how you see reality before you ever had the chance to see it for yourself. As a child, you noticed things. You saw patterns, strange coincidences, odd little moments where life seemed to be whispering to you in ways you couldn't explain. A song playing just when you were thinking of someone. A number that kept appearing. A strange feeling right before something unexpected happened. These moments sparked wonder in you. They felt significant, like the universe was winking at you. But every time you brought it up, the world quickly shut it down. It's just a coincidence. You're overthinking it. That's your imagination. And slowly, you learn not to trust what you felt. You learn to explain away the magic you once sensed so clearly. The education system took over soon after. You were handed a framework that valued logic, measurable facts, and linear thinking above all else. Imagination was fine for playtime, but not for serious understanding. Anything that couldn't be dissected, tested, or calculated was labeled unscientific, irrational, or even dangerous. The rigid curriculum didn't leave space for the subtle whispers of synchronicity. It trained you to see only what could be measured and dismissed everything else as fantasy. And the teachers weren't evil. They were just repeating what they'd been taught. The system doesn't need conscious villains to function. It just needs obedient participants. Religion played its part too. In many traditions, anything outside the established doctrine was heresy or blasphemy. If you felt a connection to something bigger, something living within the patterns of your life, it was either labeled as divine intervention, or worse, as dangerous superstition, to be feared or avoided. The middle ground, the idea that the universe itself might communicate through everyday life, was rarely offered. You were boxed into believing that divine communication was limited to sacred texts or sanctioned rituals. Everything else was your mind playing tricks. Then came the cultural programming. Movies, television, and media drilled in the narrative that people who saw meaning in patterns were paranoid or mentally unstable. Conspiracy theorists, the unhinged, the weird ones who couldn't accept life's randomness. You learned that publicly expressing belief in signs or synchronicity risked social ridicule, so you kept it to yourself. You internalized the shame. Over time, you stopped even noticing. They were thorough. They had to be. Because if you truly saw the patterns, if you allowed yourself to recognize the depth of these connections, you'd start asking dangerous questions. You'd begin to suspect that your life wasn't just happening, it was being shaped, not by governments or corporations this time, but by something far older, far more intelligent, an invisible structure underlying reality itself. And while you were being trained to dismiss these subtle nudges, the world kept distracting you. The noise of modern life grew louder. Social media, constant notifications, endless scrolling, all designed to keep your attention fragmented, your mind scattered. And the more distracted you became, the less capable you were of noticing the soft signals that required stillness and presence to perceive. Some of these connections go far deeper than I can publicly share here. Inside Insights Academy, our private newsletter, I reveal the pieces that can't be discussed on YouTube. The link's below, and for now, you'll receive a free copy of the Kybalion when you join. By the time you reached adulthood, your perception was calibrated. You lived in a world that told you, constantly, that coincidence rules everything, that nothing has meaning unless an authority figure says it does, that life is random, disconnected, and void of greater purpose. But deep down, you've always felt that wasn't true. You felt the pull of patterns you can't explain, the strange timing of events that seem too precise, the feeling that something or someone is trying to get your attention, and that quiet suspicion has never fully left you. You were programmed to doubt your own intuition because your intuition is dangerous. It's the key that unlocks everything. The moment you allow yourself to entertain the possibility that synchronicity is real, you begin to open doors the system desperately wants kept shut. Doors that lead you toward a very different understanding of reality, one where you are not just a passive observer of your life, but an active participant in a conversation with the universe itself. Once you begin to question the lie, you start to see the cracks. Those tiny coincidences you once dismissed start piling up, demanding your attention. You start to notice patterns everywhere, not because they suddenly appeared, but because they were always there, quietly waiting for you to wake up. The universe doesn't shout, it whispers. And for most of your life, you were trained not to hear it. But the language of the universe is real. It's subtle, symbolic, and deeply intelligent. Synchronicity is not random. It's deliberate communication. It's the language the system told you didn't exist. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that have no apparent causal relationship but feel undeniably connected. It's that moment when you're thinking of an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and they suddenly call you. It's when you see the same number repeatedly at the most unlikely times. 11. 11 on the clock, on license plates, receipts, phone numbers. It's when a book falls off a shelf at exactly the moment you're pondering a difficult question, and inside is the answer you didn't know you were looking for. These are not accidents. They are signals, soft markers in the field of your reality, inviting you to pay attention. Our modern world has tried to reduce everything to material cause and effect, but synchronicity defies that model. It suggests that consciousness itself is entangled with the unfolding of reality. The moment you notice a synchronicity, you are no longer a passive observer. You're a participant in an ongoing dialogue. It's as if reality is responding to your inner world, reflecting it back through the external. The universe speaks through symbols because symbols bypass the rational filters you've been conditioned to obey. They speak directly to your subconscious, the part of you they've worked so hard to suppress. Repeating numbers have always been part of this symbolic language. 11, 11, 222, 333, 444. When these numbers start appearing over and over again, it's not because your mind is simply looking for patterns. It's because something is calling your attention. Numerology has long held that numbers carry energetic frequencies. The ancient mystics knew this. Pythagoras, the man often credited with discovering the mathematical principles we still use today, believed that numbers were not just quantities but divine qualities, archetypes that structure the universe itself. But the system doesn't want you thinking that way. Because the moment you believe numbers have meaning, you start asking questions about the deeper architecture of reality. You begin to suspect that life isn't as random as you were told. You start to see that there may be an intelligence operating behind the scenes, a consciousness far greater than any government, corporation, or authority figure. A consciousness that you are inherently connected to. These signs don't just appear to amuse you, they're trying to guide you, to wake you up, to help you align with your path. Sometimes they validate decisions you're making. Sometimes they warn you. And sometimes they simply remind you that you're not alone in this experience. The more you pay attention, the more they seem to increase. It's as if reality is testing you. Will you listen, or will you retreat back into the comfort of your old programming? Of course, the system calls this confirmation bias. They want you to believe you're just seeing what you want to see. But they don't tell you how convenient that explanation is for maintaining control. If everything you notice is dismissed as cognitive error, then your intuition is always wrong, and you remain dependent on external authority to define what's real. That's exactly where they want you. But if you pause, if you truly sit with the feeling these moments create, you'll notice something deeper, a quiet resonance, an intuitive knowing that what you're experiencing means something. And that feeling, that's the language of the universe. It's not loud. It doesn't demand your attention like the noise of modern life. It waits, patiently, for you to remember. When you finally acknowledge these signs for what they are, you don't just shift your beliefs, you shift your entire relationship with reality itself. Life stops feeling random and starts feeling alive, like you're part of a living, breathing field of intelligence that's always been there, waiting for you to wake up and participate. If synchronicity is real, and by now you feel that it is, then you're forced to confront an even bigger truth, that reality itself may not be as fixed and linear as you've always been told. You've lived under the illusion that life moves in a straight line, one event causing another in a neat, predictable sequence. But that model of reality is breaking apart. Quantum physics has already exposed cracks in this illusion. The more we study the fundamental nature of reality, the more it behaves like something fluid, something responsive, something conscious. And if reality is fluid, then timelines, alternate versions of your life, aren't just science fiction. They are very real possibilities existing side by side. You've probably felt it without knowing what to call it. Moments where life seems to pivot, when a tiny decision or strange coincidence alters your entire direction. You meet someone by chance, and that encounter leads to a career shift, a relocation, a relationship that changes your life forever. Or perhaps you narrowly avoid an accident by a matter of seconds and wonder how differently things could have unfolded. These are not random twists of fate. These are glimpses into how fluid your timeline actually is. Each choice you make doesn't just move you forward, it branches you into a new reality, an alternate version of your life that now exists alongside the one you left behind. The ancient mystics spoke of these multiple paths long before quantum mechanics gave them new language. They understood that the universe is not static, but a vast ocean of potentialities, with each moment offering a fork in the road. You aren't walking a single path. You're constantly shifting between infinite possible versions of your life, based on your choices, your beliefs, your emotions, and yes, your awareness of the signs. And this is where synchronicity becomes more than just communication, it becomes guidance. Synchronicities may serve as markers, small indicators that you are aligning with your highest possible timeline, the path most aligned with your true purpose. When you begin noticing repeating numbers or bizarre alignments of events, it's not simply validation that you're paying attention. It may be reality itself nudging you toward the optimal version of your life, a version where you are in flow with the deeper intelligence of the universe rather than fighting against it. This is not about destiny in the rigid sense you've been taught to fear. It's not that your path is fully written and you have no free will. Quite the opposite. You have far more freedom than you realize. You are the one shifting between timelines with every thought, every action, every decision. But the signs are there to help you see where you are, to course correct when you drift, to realign you when you stray too far from your own potential. And this, of course, is precisely why they never taught you about it. Because people who understand they are navigating multiple realities become very hard to control. If you truly believed that your life can change dramatically based on your awareness and choices, you would stop waiting for permission. You would stop depending on institutions, experts, and systems to define your future. You would reclaim your power, and they cannot allow that. The Mandela effect, though often mocked, hints at something deeper, a collective slippage between timelines that challenges the very idea of an objective, singular history. When entire groups of people remember events differently than the official narrative, it suggests that timeline shifts may happen not just individually but collectively. And if collective timelines can shift, then the control structures built on maintaining a singular reality become vulnerable. Quantum entanglement shows us that particles, separated by vast distances, can be connected instantly, as if distance and time are illusions. If matter can behave this way, why would consciousness be any different? Perhaps what we experience as synchronicity is a form of entanglement between our inner world and the external events we witness. A hidden web of connections that science can barely explain, but that ancient wisdom has always acknowledged. Every time you see the repeating numbers, the strange alignments, the meaningful coincidences, you're witnessing the edges of this hidden structure. You're glimpsing the threads that connect your choices to a much larger, much more complex multiverse. And every time you acknowledge them, you strengthen your ability to navigate this vast field of possibilities. You move closer to living a life of conscious creation rather than programmed reaction. For decades, you've been fed a carefully curated version of science, a version that keeps you locked inside a purely physical, mechanical model of the universe, a model where everything is cold, predictable, and separate. But behind the scenes, quietly buried in obscure studies and ridiculed conferences, science has already stumbled onto something far more unsettling. Consciousness isn't just observing reality, it's shaping it. The observer effect in quantum physics isn't a fringe idea. It's one of the most disturbing revelations mainstream science has ever reluctantly acknowledged. At the subatomic level, particles don't even exist in a fixed state until they're observed. Observation, the act of conscious awareness, determines the outcome. In other words, reality responds to consciousness. But this idea was quietly contained, limited to quantum laboratories, and dismissed as irrelevant to the macroscopic world you live in every day. The truth is, they don't want you making the connection that your everyday awareness might influence your own reality in ways far more profound than you've been led to believe. You've likely heard of the placebo effect, a term that's been trivialized into meaning fake medicine. But think about it for a moment. The placebo effect proves that belief alone can alter your physical state. People have experienced real, measurable healing purely because they believed they would. The body responds to the mind's expectations. Yet instead of seeing this as evidence of the immense power of consciousness, the system frames it as a quirk, an oddity to be factored out of serious research. But this is just the beginning. There are countless documented cases of spontaneous remission, people healing diseases that medicine declared incurable, often through shifts in belief, mindset, or spiritual practice. These cases aren't magic. They are glimpses of how fluid reality actually is when consciousness fully engages with it. And every time one of these cases emerges, the system races to dismiss it, because allowing people to believe in their own power threatens the entire profit structure of modern healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and institutional control. Mainstream science, as it's presented to you, is a narrative carefully managed to maintain authority. The very institutions that define what is considered real science are deeply intertwined with political, economic, and corporate interests. Funding flows not toward research that might liberate individuals, but towards studies that reinforce the existing system of dependency. Consciousness research has been heavily marginalized for decades, not because it lacks validity, but because its implications terrify those in control. Imagine a population that truly understood that their thoughts, emotions, and awareness actively shaped their own reality. Imagine a society where people recognize synchronicity not as superstition but as the universe responding to their own alignment. That's a world filled with empowered individuals, sovereign, creative, and almost impossible to manipulate through fear, guilt, or manufactured scarcity. The narrative you've been sold is that you're a helpless spectator in a predetermined world, that your consciousness is a byproduct of chemical reactions, that your dreams, your intuition, your strange encounters with signs and symbols are nothing but neural noise. But this was never about science. It's always been about control. If you believe you are powerless, you become dependent on external authority to define your reality for you. That dependency is the foundation of the entire system. The suppression of consciousness research didn't happen by accident. Governments, military programs, and intelligence agencies have quietly studied remote viewing, precognition, and the non-local properties of consciousness for decades. They've known for a long time that reality bends far more easily under the influence of awareness than the public is allowed to believe. But while they study these abilities in secret, they mock them in public, ensuring you dismiss anyone who talks about them as a lunatic. The same pattern repeats across every sector. Information that empowers individuals is trivialized or buried, while narratives that reinforce dependence are promoted and celebrated. They tell you what to believe, what to dismiss, and what to fear. They flood you with distractions, keeping your mind occupied with noise so you never stop long enough to question whether you're actually seeing the full picture. But if you're here, listening, you're already starting to question. You're already feeling the cracks in the story you've been handed. And once you allow yourself to consider that consciousness shapes reality, that synchronicities are not random, and that you are a co-creator in this process, you step into a different kind of power, one they cannot easily take away. Long before modern science dismissed synchronicity as coincidence, ancient cultures lived by it. They didn't view the world as cold and random. They saw it as alive, intelligent, and deeply interconnected. They understood that the universe spoke through signs, symbols, and patterns. To them, synchronicity wasn't superstition. It was a natural language, a dialogue between the seen and the unseen. And at the heart of this language was one thing our modern world has almost completely stripped of meaning: numbers. The ancients understood that numbers carried energetic significance, not just mathematical value. They saw numbers as living archetypes that mirrored the structure of reality itself. Pythagoras didn't just invent mathematical formulas. He studied the spiritual qualities of numbers, believing that the entire universe was built upon their sacred harmonies. Numbers were not cold abstractions. They were frequencies, vibrations that underpinned existence. And those repeating numbers you've been seeing? 11, 222, 333. They carry meaning, far beyond what modern culture wants you to believe. When these numbers appear repeatedly in your life, they are not arbitrary. They are signals embedded within the fabric of your personal timeline. They show up at precise moments to catch your attention, to nudge you toward awareness. 11, often called a wake-up code, frequently appears at pivotal moments of spiritual awakening. It's not magic. It's not superstition. It's communication. It's the universe's way of saying, pay attention. You are on the threshold of greater awareness. This is not a new idea. Throughout history, secret societies, mystics, and initiates have guarded ancient wisdom about the deeper structure of reality. Hermetic teachings, preserved in texts like the Kybalion, speak of universal laws that govern both the physical and spiritual realms. As above, so below. As within, so without. These teachings explain that what happens in your internal world mirrors and influences your external reality. Synchronicity, in this context, becomes an inevitable byproduct of these universal laws. When your internal state aligns with the greater field, the universe reflects that alignment back through symbols and patterns. But this knowledge was never meant for the masses. The deeper truths were reserved for the initiated, those deemed worthy or trusted. Over time, this knowledge was systematically suppressed, either by institutions seeking to consolidate power or by cultural shifts that dismissed ancient wisdom as primitive superstition. The masses were fed dogma and rigid doctrine, stripped of the empowering knowledge that they, too, could participate in this cosmic dialogue. Modern society treats numerology as a fringe pseudoscience, reducing it to party tricks or vague fortune-telling, but that caricature is deliberate. If you dismiss the ancient language of numbers as nonsense, you're far less likely to explore its real implications. And the real implication is simple, yet profound. You are not separate from the intelligence of the universe. You are woven into it. The numbers are not there to entertain you. They are there to remind you. When you see repeating numbers, when you feel the strange resonance of symbolic alignments, you are being pulled toward a deeper version of yourself, a version not dulled by the numbing narrative of randomness. A version that understands there is an order beneath the chaos, a rhythm you can feel when you stop running and start listening. The symbols are everywhere. You were simply conditioned not to see them. They've taught you to fear ancient wisdom, to dismiss it as outdated, unscientific, even dangerous. But ask yourself, who benefits when you stay blind to your own potential? Who gains when you believe that you are powerless, disconnected, and insignificant? The system thrives when you view yourself as a random accident in a meaningless cosmos. But once you embrace the possibility that the universe communicates with you directly, through symbols, numbers, and synchronicity, you begin dismantling the very narrative that keeps you obedient. The deeper you go into this awareness, the more the universe responds. Patterns multiply. Signs appear more frequently. What once seemed like isolated events start connecting, forming a web of meaning that feels undeniable. This isn't fantasy. This is the reality that was hidden from you. The ancient world knew it. The mystics preserved it. And now, as the veil begins to thin, it's waiting for you to remember. For all the signs you've seen, for all the moments where life nudged you with precision, there has always been something else standing in your way. Fear. Not the kind of fear that shouts and panics, but a quiet, persistent unease. The fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of stepping outside the lines you were trained to stay inside. And this fear isn't accidental. It was planted there, carefully, intentionally, from the very beginning. You were taught early that to question the dominant worldview is dangerous, that trusting your gut, your intuition, your strange sense that life might be communicating with you directly is naive at best and delusional at worst. Society paints those who speak openly about synchronicity or universal intelligence as irrational, unscientific, or even mentally unstable. The language they've embedded into your culture weaponizes mockery against you. Conspiracy theorist, New Age nut, pseudoscience believer, labels designed to make you police yourself before you ever dare to question. But why? Why would they work so hard to make you fear your own intuitive experiences? Because those experiences are the cracks in their control. The system relies on your obedience to external narratives. If you trust your inner knowing over their prescribed reality, you become unpredictable. And unpredictable people are dangerous to systems that thrive on compliance. Every institution you grew up trusting plays a role in this suppression. The education system taught you to value only what could be measured, graded, and certified. Religion told you that divine communication happens only through sanctioned channels. The media mocked anyone who strayed from approved narratives. Even within your family and friends, the subtle pressures to conform were always present. You learned, often without realizing it, that stepping too far into your own perception of truth risked social isolation. And so, the fear grew. Not just fear of the unknown, but fear of your own capacity to know. You learned to doubt the moments when the universe spoke to you. You trained yourself to explain away the coincidences, to ignore the patterns, to call them nothing more than random chance. You silenced your own inner dialogue long before anyone else had to. But the fear goes deeper than ridicule. At its core, you were trained to fear standing out, to fear being different. This fear is primal because for much of human history, belonging to the tribe meant survival. The system exploits this ancient wiring, ensuring that stepping outside of consensus reality feels like an existential threat. They've weaponized your need for acceptance against your own evolution. And yet, despite all this conditioning, despite decades of suppression, the signs keep finding you. The numbers still appear. The strange alignments still unfold. The universe keeps whispering, refusing to give up on you. Because deep down, beneath the layers of programming, your intuition never fully shut off. It's still there, waiting for you to trust it again. You may feel that acknowledging these patterns makes you vulnerable, but the truth is, ignoring them is what leaves you vulnerable. When you disconnect from your own perception, you hand over the authority of your reality to others. You allow external systems to dictate what is real, what matters, and what you should believe. That is the real danger. That is the cage you were placed inside. The greatest lie ever told wasn't that synchronicity is coincidence. The greatest lie was convincing you that your own awareness couldn't be trusted, that your direct experience of life was unreliable without external validation. And as long as you believe that, you remain dependent, you remain controllable. But the moment you reclaim trust in your own perception, the chains begin to weaken. You were programmed to fear your own power because the system fears your power. An individual who listens to the signs, who honors the whispers of the universe, and who acts in alignment with that deeper intelligence, becomes immune to manipulation. You can't scare someone who knows they're guided. You can't control someone who understands their place in a grand, living network that transcends artificial structures of authority. And this is why, even now, they work so hard to keep you distracted. Endless entertainment, fear-driven news cycles, manufactured outrage, all designed to fill the silence where you might otherwise hear the voice of the universe, because silence is dangerous to them. In silence, you reconnect. In stillness, you begin to hear again. And once you hear, you can never go back. Beneath the surface of your daily life, beneath the endless scrolling, appointments, deadlines, and noise, there exists something vast, something you've sensed but were never taught to fully understand. Every thought you've had, every emotion you've felt, every action you've taken, ripples outward. You've been told you're separate, isolated in your own mind, cut off from everything else. But nothing could be further from the truth. You are part of an invisible network, a grand web of interconnection where everything is linked, constantly responding, constantly shifting in ways you were trained not to see. The synchronicities you've witnessed aren't isolated events. They're part of this web. They're reflections of alignment or misalignment with your own path, with the deeper current pulling you forward. They aren't messages dropped from the sky. They're echoes of your own state of being reverberating back through the fabric of reality. This is why some people see patterns all the time while others see none. It's not because one is lucky and the other isn't. It's because awareness determines perception, and perception shapes reality. You've been told the law of attraction explains this, as though simply thinking positive thoughts will draw good things toward you. But that explanation barely scratches the surface. What's really at play is far deeper. It's resonance, the frequency you hold, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, attracts experiences that match it. When you're in resonance, you naturally encounter synchronicities that reflect your internal state. It's not about forcing outcomes. It's about aligning yourself so that the universe flows with you. And the more you align, the more intense the synchronicities become. The signs accelerate. The so-called coincidences stack one on top of another, creating a momentum that feels almost supernatural. But this isn't magic. It's how the field operates. You are not a passive bystander in this process. You're an active participant in the creation of your own timeline, and the universe responds to the signals you emit. But this truth is dangerous to the system that profits from your disconnection. If you truly grasped that your internal world shapes your external reality, you'd stop outsourcing your power. You'd stop consuming mindlessly. You'd stop fearing authority. You'd stop relying on experts to tell you how to live. You would become self-directed, sovereign, unpredictable, a threat to every institution built on controlling predictable masses. The collective field amplifies this effect. Just as individuals emit frequencies, so do communities, nations, even humanity as a whole. Collective fear, outrage, and distraction create dense, chaotic fields where higher alignment becomes harder to access. And that's exactly why the system engineers global crises, endless wars, divisive politics, and fear-based media. Because as long as the collective stays in a low vibrational state, awakening remains the exception, not the norm. But you've likely noticed that something is changing. The cracks are widening. More people are starting to wake up. Conversations that would have been ridiculed a decade ago are now surfacing everywhere. People are noticing the synchronicities they once ignored, questioning the narratives they once obeyed. The web is vibrating differently. The field is shifting. This awakening is not accidental. It's not a trend. It's a natural consequence of resonance reaching critical mass. As more individuals tune in, the collective frequency rises, making it easier for others to break free from the programming. Awareness spreads like a ripple, each awakening strengthening the field for the next. This is why the system is panicking. This is why censorship tightens, why distraction intensifies, why fear is weaponized with such urgency. They know what happens if too many people step into alignment. Synchronicity isn't just a personal experience. It's a signal of where you stand within the grand web. The more you ignore it, the more you drift into timelines shaped by others. The more you listen, the more you reclaim authorship over your path. And when millions listen together, when collective resonance outweighs collective fear, the entire structure of control begins to fracture. You were never meant to be isolated. You were never meant to be disconnected from the field. The web has always been there, pulsing with information, patiently waiting for you to remember your place within it. The signs have been with you your whole life. You simply stopped trusting what you saw. But the moment you choose to see again, you reconnect not only with yourself, but with the intelligence guiding all of existence. At some point, you reach a threshold where you can no longer pretend it's all coincidence. The numbers appear too often, the alignments arrive with too much precision, and the timing of events feels orchestrated. This isn't delusion. This isn't projection. This is the moment the universe has been patiently guiding you toward, when you begin to awaken to its language. It's a language that was never spoken with words, never written in books approved by institutions, but it's one you've always known deep inside, long before the world taught you to forget. The awakening doesn't happen all at once. It starts quietly. You begin to journal the strange moments, to take note of repeating numbers and recurring symbols. You stop dismissing those strange gut feelings you once brushed aside. You start asking questions, not to others, but to life itself. And then something shifts. The more you pay attention, the more the patterns emerge. The signs intensify not because reality changes, but because your awareness sharpens. What you once saw as scattered noise becomes a symphony. You realize that the universe isn't hiding anything from you. It's always been communicating. You simply weren't tuned into the frequency. Like a radio dial slightly off station, you heard only static before. But now, as you realign, you hear the melody clearly. Every person, every event, every seemingly random occurrence begins to fit into a larger design that feels personal, intimate, and intentional. But this is where many stumble. Once they begin noticing the signs, they swing too far in the opposite direction, seeing meaning in everything, grasping for significance in every shadow. The key isn't to force meaning onto every event, but to cultivate discernment. The language of the universe requires both openness and humility. Not every coincidence is a message. Not every repeated number is an instruction. Sometimes the signs are subtle nudges, sometimes confirmations, and sometimes gentle reminders to realign with your own truth. The more you trust, the stronger the dialogue becomes. Synchronicity isn't a static language. It's alive, responsive to your engagement. When you begin living in alignment with your deeper self, you'll notice that the signs arrive effortlessly. You don't have to chase them. You simply need to remain present, receptive, and willing to act when the moment feels right. Action is what solidifies the dialogue. The universe may offer signs endlessly, but it's your response that completes the communication loop. You've been conditioned to seek approval from external authorities, to wait for permission before trusting yourself. But the universe operates differently. It doesn't issue credentials or certifications. It invites you to step into your own authority, to reclaim a trust that has always belonged to you. Synchronicity is one of the most profound validations of this inner authority, a confirmation that you are indeed connected to something far greater than you've been told. The more you live from this place of alignment, the more fluid your life becomes. Obstacles that once felt immovable dissolve. Opportunities arise seemingly out of nowhere. People enter your life at precisely the right moment. It begins to feel like you're riding a current instead of constantly struggling against it. This is not fantasy. This is the natural state you were designed to experience. The struggle, the confusion, the disconnection, that's what was manufactured. The system fears people who operate this way because they cannot be controlled in the same manner. A person who trusts their own alignment cannot be easily manipulated by fear, scarcity, or manufactured crises. They don't fall for every narrative pushed by media or institutions. They move differently. They radiate a kind of calm certainty that unsettles those who thrive on chaos and compliance. As you deepen your understanding of this language, you'll see that the signs don't always bring comfort. Sometimes they challenge you, push you toward difficult but necessary choices. The universe doesn't conspire to keep you comfortable. It conspires to align you with your highest potential. And often, that requires courage. You'll be asked to let go of what no longer serves you, to walk paths that may feel uncertain, to trust when the safety net isn't visible. But in these moments, you'll also feel the strongest synchronicities, as if reality itself is reassuring you that you are exactly where you need to be. You are not discovering something new, you are remembering something ancient, something intrinsic to who you are. The language of the universe has always been yours. You were simply taught not to listen. But now that you hear it again, you step into a reality far more expansive than the narrow corridors you've been confined to. A reality where you are no longer a passive victim of chance, but an active co-creator of your path. The awakening that begins with you does not end with you. As you start to see the patterns, to feel the language of the universe unfolding around you, you begin to notice others waking up too. Strangers share similar stories. Friends who once dismissed your insights start confessing their own strange coincidences. The ripple moves outward. This is the power the system fears most, because the moment synchronicity spreads beyond isolated individuals, it starts to erode the very fabric of control. A collective that remembers its connection to the grand web is not easily manipulated. It becomes resilient, aware, and self-directing. The system has always thrived on division. It keeps people isolated, convinced that their experiences are unique, or worse, imaginary. But as the conversation around synchronicity grows, as people find each other and compare notes, a new field emerges, one that operates on collective awareness rather than programmed obedience. And once enough people begin to live from this state of alignment, reality itself starts to shift. Timelines merge, collective choices influence global outcomes, and the old structures begin to crumble under the weight of their own irrelevance. They are trying to stop this. You can see it in the way media clamps down on alternative narratives, how algorithms bury content that challenges the official story, how fear is ramped up in every headline. But it's too late. The momentum has already begun. People are awakening faster than ever before, seeing through the illusions they once accepted without question. The synchronicities are accelerating not because the universe has changed, but because more of us are finally tuning in. This isn't about rebellion in the way they want you to think. It's not about fighting the system with anger or violence. That would only serve their agenda. True rebellion is refusing to play the game at all. It's stepping out of the frequency they've designed and choosing to operate from a higher one, where fear loses its grip, where intuition leads, and where collective resonance becomes impossible to suppress. This is the quiet revolution already unfolding beneath the surface. You may think your individual awakening is small, but it isn't. Every person who breaks free adds to the collective shift. Every conversation you have, every time you trust your intuition, every time you notice and honor the signs instead of dismissing them, you strengthen the web, you amplify the signal, you make it easier for the next person to see, to remember, to awaken. This is just the surface. Inside Insights Academy, we share the knowledge that can't be publicly discussed, deeper layers, ancient teachings, and practical tools to master synchronicity. And right now, you'll still receive the Kybalion ebook for free when you join, but this won't be available forever. What you're feeling isn't just personal curiosity, it's a call to step into the version of yourself that was always waiting beneath the layers of programming, a call to participate in the reawakening of a world long kept asleep. The universe is not neutral. It's alive, responsive, and speaking to you constantly. And now, you are finally listening. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."